Where are you going to get this stuff anywhere else, right? You know, so I'm going to introduce John Madsen. And the one thing that Terry will always tell you, the treasure's the people you meet. And I've met a lot of new people here, but John has become a really good friend. We've known each other for, I don't know, maybe 10 years. And he specializes in high-tech treasure hunting. And, you know, trust me, what you hear is going to be valuable, because this guy knows more than anybody you can imagine. And he doesn't, you know, the one thing I always say about John, he doesn't go to the park with the metal detector looking for nickels, which is kind of what I do. So, John Madsen.
So, as you see on here, this is kind of explains a lot. I don't know if you see this cartoon, but it says this complicates things. And it's a cartoon of a T-Rex chowing down on a UFO. So, so a lot of things that we find, they're unexplainable. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a lot about different technologies that I've used in different scenarios when I've gone out to help people find things and to locate things. And so some of the technical equipment that I'll be talking about, that I'll touch on, is metal detectors, scuba underwater drones, aerial drones, GPR, which is ground penetration radar, resistivity, magnetometers, LiDAR, thermal imaging, core drilling, and why you want to use those for certain things, gold panning, satellite, XRFs. I'm trying to cover a wide range of different things that are used. There are a few types of metal detectors. For those who aren't familiar with metal detectors, they help determine different metals in the ground. There's 3 types, and you can read this. Hopefully it's showing up okay. Can everyone see the screen okay?
No, I'm going out there. Oh, you're good.
Okay. Okay, anyways, there's very low frequencies, which is called the VLF detectors. And those are typically lower cost metal detectors. It's a 2-coil system, and they're lightweight and durable. They're good for land finding coins and relics and other metals. There's the next one, which is a pulse induction. Pulse induction, they're a little bit more higher cost, and they use a single coil, and they're great for beaches, rivers, and underwater. Okay, a lot of your underwater detectors will be pulse induction. They're not good in the cities when you're dealing with a lot of trash like nails and iron. They're not as good. But then you have specialty detectors, which are multi-frequency detectors, and those are great because you get the best of both worlds. There's others like the gold metal detectors, which is a higher frequency, and there's waterproof metal detectors out there, and there's 2-box metal detectors. So there's a lot of different metal detectors. For me, one of my first was the Garrett. That's a VLF detector. And then I also got the PI detector, the pulse induction, which I use for a lot of underwater. And then there's a multi-frequency detector, and the one I do with that is the Mayan Lab, which does great. So if you have any questions about metal detectors, come talk to me, and I'll help you find the right one that will work for you. So I'm going to start out with what I call the Dino Lake. And this was a project I've been involved with because someone came to me and said, John, I've heard all these stories from, it started from a guy named Wabin Watsitz, and he said there's a lake up in the Uintas that there's dinos that come out of. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting, yeah, whatever. And he said, no, you need to understand that this dino comes out every so often. But beyond that, the Spanish, they threw a whole bunch of stuff into this lake, or that the Indians threw a bunch of stuff in this lake. And I said, okay, that's intriguing. I'm curious to see what's in this lake. So we decided to go on a little journey to this lake. What I didn't know is it was going to be a 2-day hike to this lake. So we drove as close as we could to this lake, and I noticed some of these symbols that a lot of people claim that are on trees. They look like cat faces. They said, oh, that represents, you know, treasure in the area. And I said, okay, you know, that's interesting. Let's get to this lake. I want to see some hard evidence for things. So what we did is I grabbed a few of my guys, and we actually loaded in our packs. We had scuba gear. So we said, we're going to go into this lake. And we knew it was going to be we didn't know it was going to be a 2-day hike. So once we went through the first day, we found the only flat place we could find to camp. And so this was our first night. We found a place to camp, and we stayed there for the night. And the next day, as you see in this picture, we said, okay, you guys are going to go diving. And one of the guys that's in this picture is out in this audience today. And it was kind of interesting. I said, okay, it's going to be very cold. This is in the Uintas, you know. I think it's going to be around 12,000 feet here. And I said, this is going to be cold water. And so we actually didn't bring weights with us, so we actually tied rocks to these guys so we knew that they could get down into the middle of this lake. And so they get out there, and you can see that we had a little floaty that helped them get out into the middle of the lake. And they were out there, and we started hearing them scream. And I'm like, what is going on? And they said, John, something's yanking off our fins. They're undoing our fins and yanking them off. And I'm like, that's not even possible. What could be yanking off your fins? I'm like, are you serious? And they're like, oh yeah. And one of the guys, he grabs the fin as it's being yanked off, and he pulls it up, and he's like, yeah, something's in here messing with us. I'm like, okay, come back to shore. Let's figure out what's going on here. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. So we said, okay, we're going to go there in the winter. And I said, that way I can run my ground penetration radar, and I'll explain what that is here in a minute. I said, that way we can run ground penetration radar over the frozen lake. And we can see what's going on under the water. So we can see, maybe we can see a monster or something in this lake. Because I want to see what's going on here. And so you'll see us right there where the little dots on this lake. And that's me and my colleagues here and my equipment. And so we went up there with this ground penetration radar, and we also brought a drill that goes through the ice and my underwater drone, which I'll show here at the end. And we took my underwater drone underneath the ice. So let me show you a few things on this. So first off, ground penetration radar is a geophysical method that uses radar pulses to images of the subsurface. This non-destructive method uses electromagnetic radiation in the microwave band. So it's UHF and VHF frequencies in the radio spectrum. And GPR can have applications in a variety of medias. I've done it with rock. There's soil, ice, fresh water, pavement, structures, and in the right conditions, we can use that data to see what's going on in the ground. So here you'll see that I'm starting the GPR scanning on the frozen lake. A lot of people are like, wow, I never thought about using GPR on a frozen lake. Well, I try to think outside the box so I can figure things out. So what's interesting is the ice, the wavelengths will go through ice much quicker than it does water. So you can actually see how thick the ice is. And then once it starts going through the water, it'll slow way down. And I'll show you some things on that. And so I was able to see these wavelengths going to the ground. So if there's anything metallic or if there's a big monster in the water, we're going to see it, as long as the ground penetration radar goes over what that is. So here you'll see, this is some of the data, the actual data from that lake. To most people, they'll see that and they'll go, what does that mean? And I'll explain a little bit here in a minute. But GPR measurement settings, you'll see that there's different amount of feet per microsecond that it can send into the ground. Air is 980, and then you'll see the next one here is ice. And ice is 520. But the second you hit water, you'll notice down there at the bottom it says fresh water is 110. So it changes drastically. So you've got to push that really hard. So one thing with GPR, if you want to get really high resolution, then you're going to have the shallow antennas. To get deep, it's not going to be as high as the resolution, but you'll be able to see deeper, and you'll need that with water especially. What's nice with the ground penetration radar that I have, it has both antennas in one, so I don't have to scan twice. I just scan once, and then I'm able to collect the data on both. So here I'm going to show an example. This is data from a site that has ancient structure underneath the ground. And you'll see here, I'm making a 3D model where it takes different chunks of the ground penetration radar data. And what you do is you do them in lines, and then you combine them. And here you'll see how it adjusts according to what's under the ground. And you can actually see the 3D model. Let me show you what it looks like from looking from above once you collect this data. So right here, you'll see the different layers as you go down, and you'll see the ancient structure here. You'll see the walls where that structure used to be. And this is way far under the ground, and you can determine exact depth of where this ancient structure was, and you'll know what you're dealing with. So ground penetration radar works great for those who know how to use it. There's many out there that go, well, a bunch of squiggly lines. Until you know how to put it together, yeah, it's just going to be squiggly lines.
What was that depth?
This depth here, let's see. This one looked like it was about 15 meters down on this one. Pretty deep.
In the water?
No, this one was on land.
Oh.
Yeah, this one's the land one.
What type of soil?
This one was just your basic soil. It was not clay. Clay is terrible with ground penetration radar. If you guys ever dealt with ground penetration radar, it does not like clay. So this one was more of a sandy soil.
Was it frozen?
This one was not frozen, nope. You'll notice here, this is a typical signature where you see a void in the ground. Because a lot of people say, well, can ground penetration radar see caves or mines in the ground? Yes, if you know what you're looking for. Here you'll see the distinctive signature because of the ringing or the echo present within the data right here. Here's some experiments that have been done which will show you different types of material. You'll see that things like aluminum or metal will repeat itself. So sometimes I'll actually use my ground penetration radar as a metal detector. If something's really deep, it'll ping really well. And you'll be like, oh, there's some metal there, and it's gonna ping. So back to the lake. Here you'll see the underwater drone that I use. There are many types of drones, underwater drones. I wanted one that's gonna be small, that can fit through the hole that is drilled in the ice. And so what I did is I got one that was only 7.4 inches wide that would fit perfectly under that. And here's what's nice. So here we are drilling. I used just a drill that connected to the ice drill. And what's interesting is as we're going down, you'll notice at the top I have a floater. If you guys ever use a drill to drill through the ice, you want a floater, and here's why. You'll notice he's about to break through here, and oh, comes loose. So we would have lost this if we did not have the floater. Luckily, we had the floater, and so we didn't lose our equipment. Word to the wise, try to do that if you're going to be drilling through ice. A lot of people say, well, how does this look under the water? Well, let me show you how the underwater drone looks under the water. This is again, under ice. So you'll notice here, this is a little bit cloudy. A lot of lakes can be clearer than this, and some will be cloudy like this, but you can still see enough. And you'll notice here that there's a fish there on the ground. I'm gonna scare him, and he's gonna start swimming away. There he is. So he's swimming away. So we know there's gonna be fish in this lake. So that was the first thing we saw out and said, well, that's not a monster to me. That's not gonna, grab fins and yank them off. So we continued to look, and then someone said, well, what about the deep part of the lake? Well, let me show you what it looks like in the deep part of the lake, because the bottom of the lake looks much different when you go deeper. This is how it looks like when you go deeper in the lake. My daughter said they look like French fries. Let me go back again and show you one more time. So you'll get little structures like this that look like little French fries that come up. And if there was anything in the lake, we would have seen it. And then people say, well, how does the ice look from underneath? So I'm going to show you what that looks like. This is how it looks like, you know, if you follow my tether back to the ice above, because I always connect the tether with the underwater drone, so that way you can follow it back. But you'll notice the ice structure and how it forms on the top of the lake. It's very fascinating, and a lot of people are like, wow, that looks really cool. It is. It's really cool. And so here we are pulling it back out. So, yeah. So that's how it looks like with underwater drone footage. And a lot of people say, well, have you seen others? Well, this is a lake right up the road here. If you guys know the Yellowstone camping area, this is the fish that are in there. And so I chased fish around in that just recently. And so this is me chasing the fish around. So yes, you can capture fish on video footage. Next one I'm going to talk about is some things we did in the Dominican Republic. And I know the Dominican Republic was talked about a little earlier, and I know that some of the things that I'm talking about kind of overlaps what Mark was talking about earlier with the Dominican Republic. We were brought out there with the ground penetration radar to find a cave because they believed that the ship that sank there hid a lot of things in the cave. So we said, okay, how are we going to go about this? So let me show you how we went about this one. So this is the area that we were hitting. It's going to be right along the cliff edge in the background that you see in that first photo. And you'll notice in the second one, that's where the ship sank, so that you guys can see where that was. The first thing that they noticed, they found the ship with an electromagnetometer, which is the missile-looking thing there on the left, and they were able to pinpoint where it was. And it's kind of fascinating because with that, they can determine where the ship was and they can recover some coins. Now, one thing is, you've got to know what you're looking for, because here you'll notice what the coins look like in the water. They look like rocks. You would never know that they were coins. Here, let me zoom in so you guys can see. Let me see if I can zoom in. It won't let me zoom in on this. But you'll see that they just look like rocks. But then when they're cleaned up, you can tell that they're coins. So people have asked me, they said, well, what did you have to do to get to this cliff edge? Well, what we had to do is we went and grabbed some ladders, and then we brought the ground penetration radar with us because we had to get down on the cliff edge by dangling these ladders along the edge and slowly lower down the ground penetration radar to where we needed to scan. So this is us going through the jungle with the ground penetration radar, the ladders, so we could get to that point of interest so that we could scan the wall. Once we were there, we had to roll the ground penetration radar along the edge of the cliff, which I'll show in the next picture. So here we are running the ground penetration on the wall so we could see where this cave entrance was covered up. Because a lot of times people would hide things behind the cave and then make a false front to cover up the cave entrance, and so that's what we're looking for here. They fed us well while we were there, so that was great. And then a lot of times in this area, treasure chests are found. This is an example of what those treasure chests would have. They're very detailed on making sure no one could open a chest without the right key. You'll notice all the gears and everything that went into that. So when you see on the TV shows where it's just a chest and they open it up, that is not how they did it. They were very good at making all kinds of parts within the chest to make it very difficult to open. I've been to a lot of different mine sites and rivers as well, and so some of the technologies and things that we do for that. Some of it can be very basic. This is gold panning, right? Going out there in the river and just doing the old gold pan. You'll see some of the little flakes and some of the nuggets that have been found. Why gold panning? Well, I said, man, this really hurts your back when you're out there all day and you're panning. So I decided to get an automatic panner. So that's what this is. It automatically pans for you. You just put the material in there and it sifts it through, and then the gold pieces will come out and they'll fall out in the back. Because as you know, gold weighs more than everything else, and so it'll make it up this spiral better than anything else. So this is a great way to do your gold panning without bending over all day. And so this one is called the Desert Fox that I've used, and it's worked great for me.
You dry pan with it?
Yes, you can dry pan with this, and it works great. I've done that as well. The next thing I want to talk about is XRF. It's an X-ray fluorescent. It looks kind of like a little gun. What that does is that's a non-destructive analytical technique used to determine the elemental composition of materials. So anything on the periodic chart, it'll try and break those down for you and say, oh, there's this much gold or this much silver in your material. And this is a great thing to use out in the field because back in the day, they didn't have a handheld one. But now you can get handheld ones, which worked great. And this shows you different diagrams of how it works. And someone asked how much. These things can be thousands, if not tens of thousands. It just depends on which ones you get. This is me doing some analysis work on some material that someone said, oh, this is loaded with gold. As you see at the top, a lot of Fe. Does anyone here know what Fe is? Iron, yeah, a lot of iron in this rock. So I said, that's a good thing, if you want some iron. So again, people come to me all the time and said, oh, well, I think this is good ore. And a lot of times they'll say, can we just double check? And I said, well, if you want an assay done, we'll do an assay on it, and that will give you a for sure determination on how much material's in it. These are some of the mines that we went in. This one was a little sketchy to most people because they see these little sticks and they're, oh, it's gonna fall on us. No, this one was a pretty safe one because of where it was. But if you see rivers of blue like this, does anyone know what that river of blue is? Copper. Good job. Yeah, if you see that, there's copper there. And this is a room full of copper here. When I saw this room, I'm like, wow, this is the blue room. So yeah, lots of copper. Yeah, that's true. Turquoise can be there too. So magnetometer is another great way of determining things in the ground. A magnetometer is a device that measures magnetic fields or magnetic dipole movement in the ground. So you can actually see, because of the magnetic fields in the ground, you can determine things that are in the ground. And you can even find voids this way as well. And so they'll actually show you directions that the magnetic field goes and everything. This is an individual that I had come up and help me, and he's running the magnetometer, and you'll see at the end of that little stick is a little ball looking thing. That's actually a little tube that shoots into the ground, and it determines the magnetic fields in the ground. And here's one that we were using, and he actually went across something that kind of threw off his detector. Come to find out, it was a marker that said Josephine on it. I'm like, Josephine, mine? Are you kidding me? I thought that was pretty interesting. I'm like, okay. And it shows the northwest, and it's the marker number 1 on the mining claim from who knows when. So very interesting. And this is just another picture out in the field, going back and forth on a site.
Is that a flux gate or a proton?
This is a proton, yeah. So you'll notice here, in this same area, we were following a bunch of cairns based on a map that we had acquired that showed every league that there was these different cairns. A lot of people don't know that the Spanish, if you look in the bottom left, there's a special cairn there, and they put those every league because we've been told that they use those to make it so it's easier for royalty to come later and to follow the trail to their findings, right? And so what's interesting is this last cairn here had magnetite in it on one end of the cairn, so that when you put your compass on it, the magnetite would point the direction to go for the last league, which was very interesting. And we actually had to go back in the books to see when this time period was, to see where magnetic north was, and all kinds of stuff. So people say you don't use science. Oh, you use science all the time when you're doing this type of stuff. And what's interesting is these rocks were slid there. We actually saw the cut marks, and we saw where they dragged these rocks where it have little openings under them. And what's interesting is if you took a laser underneath of these rocks, all these rocks that we're finding in this area, I just show 3 here, all of them triangulated into the same point. So we knew what we're dealing with, and we knew the point of where we wanted to look for this particular project. And then we also, and while we were in the area, we found one of the mines that happened to be on the map. So we went into one of these mines, and I said, something's not right with the floor here. It just doesn't seem right. So we found out as we dug down, we noticed that there's a false floor there. So we removed the false floor, and we looked down in here, and there's another shaft going down to another area. So again, you'll find false floors, and then you'll see the little round thing there. That happened to be part of a type of oven that they use to roast their ores. And so we thought that was pretty fascinating that we found that there with it as well. This is another site that someone asked us to look at. Does anyone know what site this is in the top left? I know Terry knows where this is. So this is out near Delta, and that circle that you see up there that have these pillars of rock-looking things, the cement things, there's someone that was going to do a bunch of windmills there back in the day. And when you go out there, you're like, this looks weird, what's going on here? But someone wanted us to do some scans out there to see what was happening, and we actually did find that there was an underground bunker type thing underneath this area where they were doing who knows what. There's also on the right, and that's out that direction too, is the Great Stone Face. And on the Great Stone Face, right behind it, you'll see an eye-looking carving there. And many people may have seen carvings like that before, but I thought that was very fascinating. So. Does anyone know what this is a picture of? When you go into certain areas, you'll find a whole bunch of crystals in an area. It is, and these are called VOGs. VOGs are great indicators that there's some good minerals in that area. And you'll notice in this video right here, this was a fairly large VOG that we found that had a lot of these crystals in it, and nearby we noticed that there is a lot of gold and silver ore associated with this particular VOG. And a lot of VOGs will show up where you have a lot of fracturing going on and plates that come together. So another great example of a good VOG there. This is me running some ground penetration radar from what people considered a prayer tree. So I just wanted to show that.
Why is it considered a prayer tree?
A lot of times they say that that they would pray before they'd go into the mines, and so a lot of times they'd use trees to represent their prayer circle right in that area. This is a site up on top of a mountain where you'll see that there is a drill, and this is called a backpack drill, where you can actually do core drilling. And it's a lot easier than these big rigs that you have to get to do the core drilling for you. This is one that you can fit on your back in a backpack or take on a helicopter to the top of a mountain. And this one was actually a core sample where some gold was found on top of this mountain with this core drill. Another thing you can use these core drills for is if you feel that there's a void, you can do a core drill down to this void, and then you can get a snake camera and you can fish it down there and explore to see what's down there, to see if it's worth you spending more time and money to try and get into that cavern.
How deep do those go?
Depends how much pipe you have will determine how deep you can go. This is actually me drilling inside of a cave. A lot of people go, wait a second, the only backpack drills I've heard of is gas powered, and you'll die if you take one of those into a cave. And I said, well, I've actually modified mine with battery powered, where you can use a battery to core drill. And people didn't think that was possible. They said, oh, your battery's not going to be powerful enough. But we made it work. And then you'll actually see right here We're actually doing some core drilling right here. And so I actually have a whole bunch of core samples from this particular site where we are able to drill through and get some core samples of this particular spot. But again, you can also use those holes to fish cameras through to see what's on the other side, or do it from above to see what's in caverns. These are a few different caves that I've been in that showed some good promise, but there's nothing particular that was metallic or any gold, but there was some other interesting features once we got in there. Another good thing that you can get, FLAIR makes these, is thermal imaging. You can use those down in caves or mine shafts to see where the airflow is coming from, and so you can see where the cold spots are or where the hot spots are. And you'll notice in this video, there's a couple guys that I was with, and it obviously shows up as them being really hot, but when you go off of them, you can actually see that very small changes in temperature, so you can actually see where airflows are coming from. Even if there's been collapses, you'll be able to see airflows around those rocks. And so it can come in very handy to see where airflows are. Some of the other fascinating things that we found up here in this area is petrified tortoises. That's what you see in the top left. That's a big shell of a tortoise. And then there, you can't see it very well, but there's also a lot of solid iron rocks that you can find in some of the streams around here. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. Let's talk a little bit about drones. Drones can be very helpful. Here is, so this is one of my mine sites. I do have a mining claim up in Oregon. This is one of the mine sites I had there. And the reason why I did the drone here is because we are told that there was a dredge, a boat dredge that was stopped right on my mine claim. And I said, well, I want an aerial of this. I want to see the old structure of this ship, because you can see the big piles of rock in the river where these dredges were. And I said, I want to see the old structure of this boat that used to dredge this. And you'll see it in the left corner here. Let me zoom in here.
Grand Round or the Sumter?
This is Sumter. Okay. Yep. You know your areas.
I'm from up there.
So you'll see the structure over there on the left. That's one of the big boats that was dredging in the area. And that's the structure. So again, aerial drones help you to see things. Aerial drones also help you see other areas too, where you want to see where some slides and stuff have happened. And after I saw where the slide was, I was able to go in there and I ran the tractor to dig in a certain spot, and we found out where one of the old tunnels was. So again, aerial drones work great if you know how to use them. This is another site that we found, and we saw some interesting markers in this area, and we said, this may have some good potential. So what we did is we looked in the area to see where we could see different formations, and we actually brought a geologist on hand, and he pointed out something that was very interesting beyond this. He saw a perfectly balanced rock out there. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, I'm surprised I didn't see that earlier. And he says, yeah, this is perfectly balanced. He said, how do you think that happened? And I said, yeah, that's pretty interesting. And there's other little drawings and writings there. So we actually found the mine in this area that is very interesting and very old. So I'm going to show you what we did with this mine. So on this one, we actually, in one of the shafts, we had to be creative, again, with the ground penetration radar, and we held the ground penetration radar on the side as we were lowered down one of the shafts. And you'll see here we are being lowered down as we're scanning the walls, because we felt that there's going to be some other chambers on the side of one of these walls. And indeed, we did find another chamber beyond one of these walls that opened up into a very rich area. And so when you come up, look closely at the screen. If you can see it, you'll see some of the data that came through. So right here, we start going up, and we're capturing the data as we're going up to see where the voids were on the other side. And you'll see that here in just a minute. And so there's the definite void signatures, so we told the individuals that were with us, we said, you want to dig right here, because this is going to break into the chamber. And sure enough, we did.
Is that a Spanish mine?
This is an old Spanish mine. Yes, very old, very old.
I know. I don't know where you're at.
So here's some places down in Mexico that we also were involved in. And some of the people that I know, using just a metal detector, a very basic metal detector, was able to find this old piece down there that belonged to one of the first missionaries to Mexico, which was a really cool find because it was in the middle of nowhere in the jungles. And he said, yeah, I was just impressed to go over to an area, and he ran his metal detector, and he said he was able to pull it right out. So again, with just basic metal detectors, you can find some amazing things. This is a site also down in Mexico that a friend of mine opened up and went down into and found some very remarkable things. And the device that he used here helped him find some things from far away, and has actually used it as a way to enhance the rod that he would have that would point in the direction that he sensed, where the sensors would sense that there's gold or silver or things of that nature. A lot of people say that they use divining rods to find things, and that they use some of those gifts to find things. This is just, this blue thing helps to enhance it. And so many of you may have seen those before, and they're out there. These are a few things that they found over there. A lot of things. You'll see that they came across some old bones on one location. They found this crazy little statue thing down there in Mexico when they were digging, because they saw a signature in a certain spot. So a lot of different things that you can find. Sometimes you'll find things in people's houses or yards like this one, where we got a signature. So what did they do? They started drilling right into their cement right there, and then they were able to discover, you know, the coins and things that were buried in that location. There's lots of places in Manti too that we've looked at. Many of you may recognize some of these old writings that are over in Manti, so I've actually taken some ground penetration up in that area to inspect. And then we also did some resistivity. I marked it GPR, that should say resistivity. It's a technique of seeing resistivity under the ground, where it shows electrical currents going under the ground to determine things. And this was a funny cartoon that I ran across that says, how we wish geophysics worked. And it has the guy like Superman seeing everything in the ground. That says how geophysics actually works. You have to crunch the data, you have to try and interpret it. It's not just looking in the ground. And this is one of the resistivities that I've used in the past that will help determine voids and other things. And then the last one I wanted to look at is the Nauvoo, Iowa area. I was asked to go out to look at an area across the Mississippi River from the Nauvoo Temple to see if we could find some old structures there. And we also looked at some mounds out there too, and it's interesting because they say that these are really, really old mounds in this area. So I did run some ground penetration over these mounds to see what was in them. And we were able to determine that there was indeed things in these mounds. And then here we are running the information, running grids back and forth on the other side of the Mississippi River so that we could run a 3D grid of that area. One thing that's interesting is we had to be very careful. We almost ran over a turtle, and then a snake almost got caught up in our GPR, so we had to be very careful. So you got to be careful with the environment. And what we determined there is we were finding a lot of interesting structures really deep. And they were too deep for the tractor to get to that day, but we were able to find some very interesting rocks in the GPR data, and so we were able to determine the depth. And I said, dig this far down, this many feet, and you'll find something special. And they bring up these interesting rocks that were nowhere else, because we were able to find those with the GPR. But everything else was very deep, and so the foundations of what some believe to be a temple there were very, very deep. And in ending, I just wanted to say that sometimes things are found in plain view that people overlook. Like a lot of people don't know even that the sphinxes have something right below the ear that you never hear about. So there's a lot of theories about what that is, but again, when you're out looking at things, look very closely to see if you can see something that looks out of the norm, because that will normally help you to find something that's really there. So, do we have time to look at a couple aerials that I took in the last 2 days? Okay, so I'm going to show a couple of aerials. Some of you went on a trip at Moon Lake, so I actually took my aerial drone and I captured some aerial video of some of you guys hiking and some of the forest. So I want to show you how good some of these aerial views could be. So I'm going to pull up some of those. So this is some of the trail here by Moon Lake, and you'll see some of you guys hiking right there on the right. And you'll see I'm getting up above the trees so I can get a good aerial view of you guys hiking and seeing what the surroundings really look like. And some of you probably remember this trip yesterday. And so this just shows you some of the good views you can get from an aerial drone. And so you'll notice that as you're looking down on the trees, you can see a lot of the burned trees, but then you can also look where old mines might be without having to hike all over the place. So it comes in very helpful. I actually took it several miles away from here, and I was still able to connect to the drone, which is pretty impressive. Here you'll see I'm on the other side of Moon Lake, while I'm up on the mountainside, and I was capturing cars and stuff. The one I was following was my family, seeing what are they doing out on the lake, and so that's my vehicle right there. So you'll see you can go great distances with this, which is also very helpful. And you can also see from the aerial of how low the lake really is, and so that helps as well, just get an aerial. So this is my drone where I just hovered it as people were coming back from the trail. And so you'll see that you can actually put it to whatever level you want, and you can just hover it there, which is also nice to be able to capture things coming and going through certain areas. And so you'll see a lot of people that you know here hiking this trail back. So, and I just went to different angles just so we could see everyone coming through. Everyone was looking up at the drone going, oh yeah, we see it. And the last one I'm going to show real quick is something that happened today. We went out to Blind Frog Ranch. For those who don't know what Blind Frog Ranch is, it's on the Discovery Channel, and they're doing a series there. And I wanted to get some aerials of what's really happening there, because there's a lot of digs and stuff that have happened there, and a lot of interesting phenomena that's happened at Blind Frog. So I wanted to get some good aerials. So let me show you some of those. The first thing I did is looked on the cliff edge, because I just wanted to see if there's some interesting things on this particular cliff edge. And so with this, you can actually go very close to cliff edge. So if you see petroglyphs or something high up on the cliff, what a better way than to take a drone up there so you can get a closer view. Or if you see a cave up there and you want to get a closer view of this cave, or whatever you're looking for. And so that's what I did today. I wanted to see what writings were up on these cliff edges, if I saw anything of interest. so that I could focus on those areas. And then what I do here in a minute is I go up and over, because people with our group were actually sifting at a location, and we were actually finding some old beads, very, very tiny beads with holes in them, and they were able to find those by sifting in this particular area. So that was really cool for them to find those. And so I'll fast forward to that spot. So here you'll see the cars gathered, and then you'll see the overhang, and that's where a lot of these small beads and other things have been found. They actually found some coins in this area as well, right in this little dig site right here. And so you can see the sifter there as well, where people were able to shake it back and forth and find these tiny beads. But what's interesting is that the beads are all different colors. The red beads, however, are very special because when we shot those, they were actually gold. Oh, that's fine. Yeah. I was just told we need to turn on the spotlights to see me, so just don't shine it on the screen. So, can you guys still see the screen okay? Okay. And so, again, this was a great spot where you could get an aerial view so you can see the site a little better from a bird's eye view. So, and this was actually done today when we went up there. And you'll notice as we go away, you'll see some of the ponds that are there of water. And for those who have not watched Blind Frog Ranch, they named it Blind Frog Ranch because the rancher, when he was digging here, when Dwayne was digging, his tractor fell back into a cavern, which then produced a whole bunch of water, and all these frogs were coming out with the water, but the frogs were blind because they were down underneath the earth for so long they became blind, so he called it Blind Frog Ranch. They've found Roman coins and a whole bunch of other things in this area, so that's why it's a place of interest. You'll see the pond right there where they actually went down and they dove in this pond and found some old structures down in the water over 50 feet deep in this spot that his tractor broke through. So again, interesting things going on, so that's why I went there. And I also brought up my underwater drone. Unfortunately, ran out of time to put it in there to go capture some of the structures that are in the water. But again, great way to utilize a drone is to get some good aerial views of everything that's going on. So I thought it would be cool to see some of the things I've done in the last 2 days with some of the equipment I have. And so those who are interested, I do have my ground penetration radar here and all my other equipment, so that afterwards you can come and take a look at it and see how it works, and I can explain a lot to you. And so anyways, I thought that would be cool to see this. And if you have any questions about technology being used in treasure hunting or in mining, feel free to come to talk to me. So, and I'll help you where I can. So thanks.
Good job, John. I got to tell you, John, we had a trip lined up a few years ago, and we was going to Robber's Roost, and because of the powwow, I had a mine lab. John, you remember what? I think it was a 6000. The coil on it was about this big around, and so a bunch of us went down there. I called John. I said, John, you got to come. So we went down there, and it rained like a bugger. So everybody left, and John and I came back, and we took this big dollar metal detector and was at Robber's Roost there. So anything he was going to find was going to be amazing. And we went up into this area that a friend of ours had found a pistol. And so we got going in there with this mine lab, and it was bam, bam. And we were digging, and we were digging, and we were doing high fives and screaming and yelling. And we dug, and we dug, and it kept pulling it up. And we pulled out the best looking garbage can that you have ever seen.